Good evening, everyone in person and on the camera and from far distances. Welcome to tonight's event, Investigative Journalism and Information Disorder in the Arab World. My name is Rochelle Davis, and I'm the Associate Professor of Cultural Anthropology here in CCAS, and I'm super excited to introduce Rawan Daman, who is the Director General of Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism, Arish. So Rawan is not only in that role as Director General, but she's also a filmmaker and media specialist, and she has 20 years experience in academic and professional media management, television, and digital training. Before joining Arish, Rawan worked on producing and directing more than 30 hours of documentaries and investigative stories published in different languages, including the award-winning Nakba series, came out in 2008. And she was a senior commissioner at Al Jazeera Network for 10 years, leading a team who produced more than 250 documentary and investigative TV episodes. Rawan received her master's degree with honors in media and communication from the University of Leeds in the UK in 2003, and she was awarded the Media Creativity Award from the Arab Thought Forum in Beirut in 2015. So she's going to start her presentation today explaining Arish, her work there, and investigative journalism in general. And then after that, that will probably be half an hour, 45 minutes, somewhere in there. After that, we'll open it up to audience questions. So if you're joining us in person, really easy, raise your hand. I'll answer them. I'll call on you. If you're online, please ask your questions using the Zoom Q&A feature, and our events manager will direct them to me. So if you have any technical issues, please email our events manager, coco.tate, T-A-I-T, @georgetown.edu. And this information will also be in the chat. And so with that, let us welcome Rawan here for this great event. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Rochelle. Thank you, Coco, for all the support. I'm so glad of being here tonight. And hopefully it will be somehow useful to explain the situation of the investigative journalism and misinformation in the Arab world, and for Arish as a case study. As Professor Rochelle said, I'm the Director General of Arish, and Arish stands for the Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism. We cover the whole of the Arab world, and for those online and offline, and thanks for everybody who tuned in person and virtual, the Arab world, it's considered also the Middle East and North Africa. So it's Mauritania, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Sudan, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Yemen, and Somalia. This is where we work. So I am based in Amman, Jordan, where I was born. And we cover the whole of the Arab world. So we have investigative journalists and fact checkers who are working across this region. And mainly, we are devoted to supporting the ecosystem of investigative journalism in the region. That means that supporting the work of investigative journalists, editor, coaches, fact checkers. Mainly, we focus on the individual, the journalist herself, himself, the fact checker, the coach, and the editor. We also, of course, focus on women and underrepresented social groups, and we act in a very digital resilience situation. What we did, we were established in 2006, so we are a 15 years old organization in the region. We coached, our model is training by doing. And so we train the journalists, and by this training, they produce their investigations. When we talk about investigations, it's mostly digital and a few TV video investigations. We produced more than 750 investigations in the last 15 years, and tens of those were impactful, award-winning investigations. We are very proud of our collaboration with ICIJ, whom I met here in DC yesterday. And we were part of the Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, Fencent, and Pandora Papers. And we can talk more about how to produce such a cross-border collaboration in the Arab world with leaks on international level. And we trained more than 4,000 journalists, editors, fact checkers, and academics. We have a curriculum that we, over 10 years, we have worked and advanced on it, and now it is taught in more than 70 colleges and universities across the region, where professors teach investigative journalists to undergraduates and postgraduates. We don't work with students, but we work with the professors who teach investigative journalism. For example, in some countries, for example, Syria, in the university, they don't call it investigative journalism. Investigative journalism is a taboo word. So we call it the in-depth reporting, just to make it happen. Or they don't call it as a rich curriculum. So everybody knows it's a rich curriculum, the professor and the students, but not the university, not the head of the university. So in many countries, even the word investigative journalism is problematic. One of the other countries, for example, Morocco, where we call it in-depth reporting or reporting in general to make this work. And we have our annual forum. It's happening on the first weekend of December. It's always the first weekend of December. And this December, it's the 15th annual forum. You can all tune to it because it's a full hybrid event. We are expecting 300 people in person in Amman and around 3,000 people online. So last year we had 3,900 people online, and it's fully translated into English with the sign language. So you can tune in if you are interested to hear what the investigative journalists from the whole region say and have to say. And we have our award ceremony. So the gold, silver, and bronze, it's also our 13th annual award. And we are very glad that Rimad Musa is one of our jury members this year that is marking all the interest for the most prestigious investigative journalism award in the Arab world. During COVID times, because this shifted a lot, all of our work in general, globally and in the region, we needed to shift everything online. So we created a secure platform called arijacademy.net, and it's a secure platform where we can teach and train on investigative journalism. We also changed, I would say dramatically, our safety model. And we'll talk about that, why we did this, and the threats that are happening to investigative journalists and fact checkers in the region. So I'm trying tonight to speak about 5 most challenges. And so it will not be depressing and or negative things, because things are not going the right way and upper. Unfortunately, things are getting more suppressive, less access to information in the region. I started this career 25 years ago. 25 years ago, things were better. 10 years ago, things were better. So we are not going better but worse, but we'll focus on the challenges and say what we are trying to do on our very small scale, of course. The first thing is the low levels of media freedom and dangerous environment for journalists in MENA. Unfortunately, in every Arab country, all of the Arab countries you saw on the map, all of them has now more and more less media freedom. Freedom of expression, trying to publish. So we face problems finding a publishing platform, because we are not a publishing platform, we are a training institute, just to find a publishing platform. But the good thing that if nobody in Egypt accepts to publish the investigation, we publish it in Beirut. So people in Egypt can read this. If nobody is accepting to publish it in Jordan, then we publish it in Egypt, and then people can read the piece published in Egypt. So it's good that it's a one language, and then we can disseminate the content. The problem that nowadays, more than 1/3 of the journalists who work with us write in anonymous names. They cannot work, with their real names. And we are the only region where we have fact checkers working in anonymous names. Even in Latin America, in India, they don't have this. Fact checkers are for those who fact check the information. They need to be known as fact checkers. In our world, because also fact checking politicians is very, very dangerous. As we are speaking now, friends and journalists are in the prison just because of simple pieces of investigative journalism. Not about, number one of the country like kings and presidents, no. even less investigations, and they are accused and being in prison because of that, or being banned of publishing because of that. And this is why what we try to do is continue the training. One of the very, very difficult countries to work in is Algeria. If a journalist in Algeria works with us, he or she is accused of working with a foreign entity. This is in itself can get you into prison just because you collaborated with a foreign entity in publishing a story. So what we do, we continue to train. We try always to have small groups for the advanced training, get more and more new blood, because unfortunately, journalists, when they face all of those problems, many of them decide to leave this domain because they say, this is a lot of threats. Why do we have this? The threats are from killing the journalists. We had in early 2020, a journalist who worked with us before in Arij. Every journalist who worked and published with us an investigation, he or she called himself Arijian. So it's like a new identity. And with the global identity crisis that here in the States and everywhere speak about, we have solved this problem. So now we have a regional identity where it's a safe environment, everybody can be himself or herself. One of our Arisians, a journalist in Iraq, was killed in early 2020. In late 2021, we had a Yemeni journalist. She was killed. She was with her husband, pregnant, going to the hospital. They bombed their car and she was killed. So the threats comes from killing a journalist because he or she is a journalist, to death threats coming to journalists where they need to relocate within the same country or relocate to another country. And it goes to more and more digital threats and even online harassment that we really faced with our journalists, mainly during the online COVID time. So to be defending that and trying to be prepared for this, more and more we are encouraging them to publish in anonymous names, so nobody will know this journalist. One of the techniques we use, and we learned this from ICIJ, where everybody published like Pandora papers at the same day, same time, exactly all over the world. For example, we had an investigation in Palestine about nepotism in Palestine and how the Palestinian Authority is giving the jobs only for their friends and families in diplomacy track. We have gathered this from the newspapers. So when they announce in the newspapers the jobs and the names, we gathered all of this data because nobody is giving us the data. Of course, when we try to access the information, they don't give us. And we, over months, we calculated and we were about to publish the investigation. But the investigative journalists in Palestine are a few. So if we publish it in Palestine in one or two publishing platforms, they will end up knowing who is journalist, even if they published in anonymous names. So we orchestrated this and we published in 16 different publishing platforms, Arabic, English, in Palestine and outside of Palestine at the same time. So it's a mechanism of safety as well. We found out with practice that training on safety as a workshop or training is not enough. So you cannot train people on physical safety because our model is 5 pillars for safety: physical, digital, psycho-support, legal, and career support. We added career support only this year, 2022, because we found out that journalists are leaving the domain, and especially female journalists. So we said, then career should be part of the safety model. We help them with building their LinkedIn, their CV, Arabic and English, and try to help them with their career path so they will stay. Especially that many of them moved to freelance during COVID. Many media outlets laid people off and they transferred to freelance. And so we want them, for example, if you are an environment journalist, then we try to help you go to this conference, do this workshop, so you can advance in this career. Especially that nobody can live out of investigative journalism alone. So they do an investigation, but they work on features, on in-depth reports, on news, on other things, parallel with doing the investigation. So for the 5 pillars, we have self-based courses, online courses, simple ones like 101 in psycho-support, in physical safety, and in digital safety. This is prerequisite. Then we have the small workshops. Then we have the one-to-one clinic. So the physical safety expert will sit with a journalist from Yemen, speak about her specific story, do the risk assessment, and see how this will evolve. Because the risk assessment should be continuous. Maybe after 1 week, 2 weeks, things will change. So we have the physical safety, digital safety. Surveillance is on the highest in the Arab countries. And unfortunately, they collaborated also with Israel on this. So they have the highest technology in many of the Arab countries to track what's happening to human rights defenders and journalists. So we need to prepare our journalists, both software, hardware, how to deal with digital safety, one-to-one clinics. Then cyber support. Cyber support is a big issue because most of the people go to it after they are traumatized. What we try to do is before, when the journalists want to go and interview the tortured people in the prisons in Egypt. Before going to meet the victims, she or he needs to know how to deal with that before going to the field, be prepared to what will happen. Then legal safety, the free safety models here, you can have experts not from your own country. When it comes to legal safety, you need a lawyer from the same country because the laws are very, very different between each of the country, and sometimes one word can get you into defamation and the court. So we need to be very careful about this. And then the career safety. So every single investigation, globally and in a region, needs to go to the fact checker, preferably not from your own country. Then his critical eyes will be different than the own country. And then a lawyer from the same country to say that it's okay to publish. And we tried also, after the Arab Spring 2011, many of the excellent investigative journalists we worked with and trained before left the Arab world. From Syria, from Yemen, from Egypt, and they are now in Turkey, in Europe. So we started to collaborate also more with them because we wanted also to keep them in the pool of the investigative journalists. The second challenge is the acute differences in the digital environment across the region. So you have problems of internet in Lebanon, where it's a big issue, in Iraq, in Palestine, in Libya. There is sometimes days we need to upload from Yemen pictures. We wait for 3 days to upload something that here in DC, it will take like 30 minutes to upload it. So it's a huge difference. While in the GCC, internet, of course, is very quick. You can upload things. And this reflects itself with a new monopoly for the content. Globally and in MENA, the tech companies are the ones who control the content. No longer people are going to websites to read this content. They are reading this content, watching those videos in the platforms, Meta, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Google, YouTube, and all of that. And this is a problem because it's a new model. We need to see how the algorithm will not affect what we are publishing and what we are doing, because it is publishing, affecting this. And the journalists in general are not trained enough on packaging their stories. They are good to produce, bring the evidence of the investigative journalism, the proofs of this hypothesis, but not on packaging it to the new monopoly that is happening. So for this big challenge, we have opened serious discussion and trying to collaborate with the social media platforms and talk to them. So we decided, some people decided not to talk to the social media. So they refused to talk to Meta, they refused to talk to Google. We decided, no, we need to talk to them. We need to have discussions with them, even if we have big criticism of what's happening. Let's say on YouTube, we face a lot of problems because they don't take the hate speech off. We write to them, they don't respond to us and all of that, but we need to keep this conversation going. And if it is with a consortium, not with our small foundations like Scattered, it will be better. And we saw a response when Meta just 2 weeks ago published a report about Palestine. They confessed to what happened that we were talking about this months before. Second is trying to build a story distribution and packaging training for the journalists that will help them with their career. And the third is to try to support the journalists with internet packages that they can function in their own countries. Sometimes in some areas, it's almost impossible. Like in Egypt, we had one journalist who wanted to be trained with us. We had a 5 days workshop and we wanted to support him with like a better package, but he said it's impossible. At his home, the whole area, or at his office, the whole area, there will not be internet sufficient for him to be with us. So he moved and slept in his friend's home for 5 days to make sure that he has access to the platform and he can be with us. And in Yemen, we had one case where we needed to pay $150 to get him the internet to be. So sometimes it's extremely expensive to get the package for the low access markets. The surveillance and the control, ironically, of course, it's in the most digitally advanced countries. So you know about the COP27 that is happening in Sharm el-Sheikh in November. Just today, we were denied access to the COP for 4 of our journalists. So, because they know the name Arish is not welcomed in the COP in Sharm el-Sheikh, and next year it will be in United Arab Emirates, and we will not apply because we know exactly what will happen. So for this challenge, it's only the safety, digital controls and monitoring as much as we can. So our journalists only communicate via encrypted emails, only via Signal. Even in some countries like Egypt, if you are stopped by the police control, like the checkpoint, and they find that you have Signal app on your mobile, you can be taken to prison because of that. So we train them to delete the Signal app before reaching out to any place, because when they see Signal, then you have something to hide since you are using the Signal app. So it's very complicated what's happening, and there is no perfect solution for what's happening. But what we did in Arish, we moved all of our digital assets to Europe because there was no other way. We were hacked even with our digital assets when they were inside the Arab world. We had advanced digital security internally. As I said, we shifted to encrypted emails and networking environment. We invested so much in hardware. And recently also we opened a chatbot where we are helping not only the Arisians and not only our community, but the larger journalists and human rights defenders with digital security questions and answers. And it's something very new that we tried to launch a few weeks ago, and it's going well. People are asking questions sometimes from, they hacked my Facebook, they managed to change my password. Recently, they sent emails in my name, like you see Rawan Daman email, name, but the email is something else. And they sent it to people. They said, they started this. So we needed to do a talk and a lecture for partners and everybody, okay, take care. Because some people, they don't look on the email. They just see the name and they are becoming more smart, saying, this is the document I sent you. So you don't feel suspicious about this. This is phishing. Once you click, all your data, your things will be accessible. And more, of course, the misinformation that's happening globally. In the States, this became more and more important after 2016 and the elections and Trump and all of that, and also globally. The difference between what's happening of malinformation, disinformation, misinformation, fake news, and even when it goes up to hate speech, the difference between that happening, let's say, in the States or in Europe with the Arab world, that in the Arab world, some of the real actors are the governments, where they use this as balloons, testing balloons to see what can be done. So this is a big problem. Second, many players in this, and if you are interested, we just published in April with Cape Town University a book on disinformation in Global South. It's an online book, it's for free, it's published, and we worked for 18 months on the chapter on Middle East and North Africa. Other partners worked on Latin America, Africa, and East Asia. And we tried to document the main players in this disinformation, and its connection also with media literacy and with the fact checkers in the region. We are very proud that there are more than 50 different initiatives, groups, organizations that are working on fact checking in the region. And most of them work on post-publication fact checking, trying really to stop rumors and to raise the trust in the media. What we are worried about that when I started this career, when I went to the field and as a reporter, people in general were trusting the idea of the identity of a reporter. So a journalist, a reporter was somebody they trust. Now, when I go to the field, the first thing they say, you are the misinformation. So people now mix between disinformation, and the fact-checked content. And this makes our fact-checked content that we spend months and sometimes years to produce in a very questionable, trustable situation. Also, this goes cross platforms, cross the borders of the countries, and impact everything. So something that happens in Morocco, and we saw this, like misinformation, disinformation, then you saw it, you will see it going in Qatar. So the same idea goes quickly from one country to another. This is, I think, one of the biggest challenges we are facing nowadays. And it's connected with online harassment, especially towards female journalists. Our response was first to initiate a project called I Will Not Stay Silent, mainly for female journalists to come out and expose what's happening to them. The problem in many Arab countries, very conservative societies, the female journalist, when she faces online harassment, she is worried to tell her brother, father, mother, sister about this. They don't want to tell them because they fear that when they tell them, they will tell them, stop writing, stop being a journalist. So, and they don't want to go to the police. They don't want to go to the legal track. So they keep it to themselves. And so what we initiated is helping them with psycho support and with trying to stop this. And here we started talking to the social media platforms, because then we can talk to the social media platform and tell them that this is happening, because it's mostly happening not on the main Facebook page. It's happening inside Messenger. It's happening inside WhatsApp and all of that. We are very proud of this. We have done it now for 2 years, and it's one of the main slogans that Arij has been famous with, Lan Abqa Samita. The second, we initiated the Arab Fact Checkers Network, AFCN, because we have been working for the last 15 years on pre-publication fact checking with fact checkers on the pre-publication, which is something very missing in the region. You will find very few organizations in Arabic language content doing pre-publication fact checking for features, in-depth reports, investigations, documentaries, and all of that. And now there is a mushroom of post-publication fact checking. So what we try to do is to bring those together, the pre-publication with the post-publication. The organizations, initiatives, many of them are volunteers with the freelancers, because a lot of them are freelancers. If you follow this, there is IFCN here in the States, the International Fact Checkers Network, that worked so well during COVID time. It's also a foundation and NGO. So we talked with them, also with the IFCN, when we wanted to initiate this idea, and we started AFCN. And we are very glad that now AFCN is working with pre-post publication fact checking, getting freelancers and organizations to work together. We already signed more than 25 different memorandum of understanding with different organizations. Our aim is to raising capacity of the fact checkers, because we believe that when we do this, it will help the ecosystem of investigative journalism in the region. And we have signed memorandum of understanding with all of those, small organizations. Most of them are small to medium size, and some of them, for example, Sahih Masr is fully anonymous. Even we don't ever know who is the fact checkers. We work with them. They appear on Zoom, on our platform, secure online, but we never saw them. We never because, and we fully respect this because it's very, very dangerous to work in Egypt on fact checking. And the last is the limited access to government or business data sources. We work a lot on data investigations and we need access to information. During 2020, for example, in Jordan, we have a good law on access to information. Also in Tunisia, there's a good law, but the implementation is the problem. We applied during 2020 in Jordan 20 times for access to information, FOU requests. We got twice a reply out of 20 times. There's a very funny story. We did an investigation about Baha'is in Jordan. Baha'is is like a sect in Jordan, and they don't get their full rights for the nationality, for marriage, for their kids, and all of that. We published the investigation in Arabic language. Nothing happened. We published the investigation in English. And then we got a reply for a request we sent 2 years after sending the email. So I was completely shocked. I said, they have in their inbox email after 2 years, just because we published it in English. And it's so funny because many times politicians, officials, they don't care when we publish in Arabic language. Only when we translate in English and somebody reads it in English and talk to them, oh, now it's important. Now we need to respond to this and all of that. So we really have big problems of accessing data. And there is a big mismatch between the data sources and the investigation working in Arabic. Also, the tools themselves. The tools are very English oriented. They work only in English language. There's a big problem in Arabic language and the RTI applications. So our response was first to try to develop data sets. Over 10 years, we worked on gathering newspapers from all over the Arab world. And I'm so glad that we did this because in some Arab countries now, those newspapers don't exist. We only have them. Like in Syria, in Lebanon, they are gone. So now many also, American, European journalists, when they need an extract from a newspaper, if they say, for example, we need Egyptian newspaper 1960, blah, 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 we can get them that copy of the newspaper. So we started gathering official newspapers from over 16 countries. We started with 11, now we have 16 countries. This is very helpful. There's a big problem of archive maintenance in the Arab world, big issue. Second, we started to co-develop tools for Arabic language where it is a bit of more development. So it's tiny, little more thing for the English tool. And also we got, partners to help us with this. And we do our data gathering ourselves. So if you check arish.net website in the English section, then you'll have a lot of data stories where we gather our data. Of course, it takes months then to gather. For example, we wanted to gather about we found out that schoolyards in Jordan, there's a lot of schools, but without any yard. So the kids play in the street, or the yard is very, very small, the playground for the kids. We asked the Ministry of Education to give us like the spaces and all that. Oh, we don't have this information. For the governmental schools, for private schools, we don't have it. So we went to Google satellite images and we started doing it ourselves. Then we went to the schools and we did the field work for this. Of course, this takes months, but at the end, we have a cleaned data, we have the proof, we go to the ministry and say, there is a big problem. The percentage for the number of students and the yards and the playgrounds is a big issue. And I'm very proud that we did this 6 months data diploma. We did it in 2020, 2021, and 2022. So it's 6 months. It's one of the most demanding programs we have. 600 people applied to this year diploma. we got only 28. So you have 500 plus angry that we didn't get them, and they write to us and all of that. And we work very deep with those for 6 months. And now we have strong data journalists who are able to gather, cleanse, and also visualize this data. And for the no access to information, and just today I met Mary Inman. She's an American lawyer that has been supporting whistleblowers for more than 25 years. She's excellent. We have reached out to her when we thought about this idea of getting the first Arabic language whistleblower platform. Because with no access to information, there's no way but to encourage and protect whistleblowers and give them the access to be anonymous. So we opened our first Arabic language whistleblower platform, iArij, and the whistleblower can stay anonymous, can leak the documents, videos, audio, and then we can talk to him or her, and he can or she can stay anonymous as well. We did a policy paper about whistleblowers in Jordan, and it's available in Arabic and English. And we found out that the law is there, the implementation is not happening. We documented 3 whistleblowers in Jordan, 3 of them women. They didn't go to the media. They went to the transparency institution in Jordan, and they exposed the wrongdoing that was happening. Their names were leaked from that institution, and the 3 of them were forced into early retirement. Whistleblowers are very courageous. They come out to expose what's wrongdoing happening, and there's really very limited protection to them. And this is why, and we said this platform is also for the small. It's not only about the million of frauds or corruption. If there is hitting in the schools, violence in the schools, you have videos for that, send them to us. We can fact check them and then do the investigation based on that. Of course, you have a lot of information that comes that is not fact. And so this is our role of to fact check this. So basically, our triangle is the investigative journalist, the fact checker, and we recently added only last year the whistleblower. Not because we built a community of investigative journalists. We have more than 4,000 in our community investigative journalism. The fact checkers, we have now hundreds, and building still this community. The whistleblowers, there's no community of whistleblowers, of course, but we are encouraging whistleblowers through the empowerment, networking, and innovation. We added this to try to help with the tools and the data. Maybe for you it's all theoretic, but for me, they are our journalists, our agents. I'll give you one example of Linda Maher. She's a Palestinian journalist born in Hebron in Palestine. She did her bachelor's degree in Hebron in 2017, and she did with us the first course of basics of investigations in 2017. And then she did the advanced investigative skills in 2018. So in 2017, she didn't produce any investigation. Whereas many of those journalists who have 4 or 5 years experience, 2 years experience, they are still trying to see what is this journalism. I remember I trained her inside Palestine in 2018 in the advanced investigative journalism. And then she got the open source data training with Arij. And she started the data diploma, the 6 months one. And in that data diploma, she started after almost 17, 18, 19, 24 years of her graduation, the first investigation. And the first investigation was coached by Huda Uthman, one of our executive editors based in New York. And she's Egyptian American. And the first piece, when it came to Huda called me, she said, "What is this? 6,000 words, and I cannot understand the story." It's like, there's a big problem. And then we said, okay, let's get Linda into one-to-one clinic for writing, because she has the information. She gathered a lot of good information. She has the proofs, but she is unable to write it in a story. And then she started writing more, like feature stories, in-depth reports with Daraj, with Rasif 22, with many publishing platforms in Arabic language. And then she did her second investigation that was published last year. And that one was nominated to awards. And then she did a fellowship with NED and an incubator, and her third investigation is going to be published soon. So I'm so proud. This is an example of how investigative journalists need to be. It's a long-term thing. This is why many people, they don't understand this. This is an investment in the human resources, but for a long time. And really, it was nominated to a big data award, globally, not only regionally, her second investigation. As I said, I would encourage you all, if you are interested in fact-checking investigations and learning more about what's happening in the region, to tune to our ARIJ annual forum. It's from the 2nd until the 4th of December under the theme Defending Independent Media. So who are we really, the ARIJ people? We are only 30 people. So you will not imagine like we are 1,000 people. We're only 30 people in 9 different countries, from 7 different nationalities. We have a joke at the office. I'm not sure if our editor-in-chief is tuning today. It's like in Jordan, it's early in the morning now. So he has a joke at the office. He always says that there is we. Rawan says there's we, and there is another we that we don't know who they are. Rawan thinks that there is 2 we. We, the 30 people, and another people who are doing all of them. So we are a very small group, but I'm so proud of this team that is doing great work. We are half of us are freelancers, half of us are full-timers, and we have 60% females. And this is the group. This is Samia Aish, our communication manager, taking a selfie of the whole group, whom without them, that they believe in that we cannot be depressed. I met many years ago, maybe in 2010, Samih al-Qasim of Muhammad, one of the Palestinian poets. And I told him that I'm depressed, things are going bad, everything is going bad. And then he said, Rawan, in our situation in this region, depression is a luxury. So never say you are depressed. The people who are depressed, people who have food at the table, their home and everything. And I learned this, never to be depressed, never to say that things will not, there's no hope or there's no way to change. We can change things. And having people who believe in freedom of expression, accountability, justice can make things different. Thank you very much, and I'm open to Q&A.
Thank you. Are there any questions here in the room?
I just want to say this is why we in Al Jazeera, we love Rawan, because this is when she wants to give the lighthearted version of what's going on. This is the hopeful one. It's hard. Well,
We need.
You should figure out where it's not on your face. Is it looking okay, Coco? Does she look okay? Okay.
the camera.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I wanted you just to continue the conversation. You said early on, you said we can talk more about how to produce cross-border investigative reports. And thank you so much for this incredible sort of preview of your work and also the media landscape as you described it. So, I mean, it's amazing what you're doing, and it's hugely important work. So thank you for sharing all of that with us. But if you could just sort of elaborate on that, because I think you laid out how you do it with security and connections and all of that, but then that doesn't get the work done. So how do you actually get the work done?
Yeah, I mean, we learned a lot from working on Panama Papers and Paradise Papers at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have the capacity to do this big data that, especially in Arabic language, when you have thousands of documents coming to you. And it was really a privilege that we were, I think in Paradise Papers, we were the only Arab organizations with ICA agenda. Now we have around 5-6 organizations. And it was a big shift in the thinking of investigative journalists, because in investigative journalists, we are always very keen about hiding our story until they're published, and very keen about this is my story. And so we keep this to us. And for the first time, we had cross-border collaboration with all of those organizations. And we have a place where we share our ideas. It was a big learning experience for us. And I think we learned a lot from that time until now. So with Fencent project, we worked for 18 months. With Pandora Papers, we worked for almost 2 years with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalism. And also it was a learning experience, because when you have a story, let's say in Egypt, it's connected with a company that is in Germany. And this company has people in Canada, and they have the offshore near Australia. So also follow the money, corruption, and fighting corruption became much more difficult, because also the corrupted people became much smarter than the times we had Paradise Papers and Panama Papers. At that time, they were all shocked and surprised of what's happening. Now with Pandora, they were prepared. So they had now lawyers to help them hide the corruption and the fraud that they're doing. So I think for me, investigative journalism now, you cannot be alone an investigative journalist and do the story. Of course, we do local stories. 1 person, 2 people can do it with international standards, but that's a very local story. If you want to do something with a real impact and change, you need the cross-border collaboration. And this is why I always try to encourage Arab journalists. There is a problem, of course, of language sometimes to do all of this, but there's more and more Arabic language documents that even ICIJ or Der Spiegel in Germany and all of that, they needed Arab journalists to be part of this consortium and work on this. Pandora Papers, we worked on 6 investigations for 2 years. There was a story on Yemen, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Sudan, and Kuwait. We had big problems publishing those stories. It's more and more difficult. Yes, it's a safe model that we all publish at the same time, but in the Arab world, it's becoming more and more risky, even to be part of big consortiums. So it's like a double coin thing. We need to continue to do this, and perhaps we need different ways. Sometimes in a region, we work on investigations, but the Guardian or the BBC publish it. We never say it's our story. So just to protect us, only we and the Guardian knows that this is our story. Everybody thinks it's the Guardian story. So this, but I think our journalism and investigative journalism work changed a lot since the cross-border collaboration. We started now implementing this on cross-regional collaboration. So get Arab journalists from different Arab countries. Before COVID, it was a big challenge to convince them to work together. After COVID, it became so easier because during COVID, they couldn't travel. So they needed help. So now they reached out and they found out, I can do this. I am in Alexandria in Egypt, but I can't go to Libya. I'll find somebody in Libya. And this is also the secret sauce of Arish, because we are a community, a network. So they found each other's quickly. They knew each other from before, they collaborated. So I think in the future, it will be much easier to get people to work together. Before it was really a challenge to convince them to do this.
Great, thank you. Any other questions in the room? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of Dr. Davis's question as well. And thank you for your presentation. This was really, really interesting. And clearly your work is extremely important in the region and outside of it. And yeah, I know how much the space has been closing across the Arab world, particularly places like Egypt, as you kept bringing up, for work, not only with your organization, with journalists, but for organizations of all kinds. And you mentioned a little bit about how your work has been changing sort of in response to that. Part of that has been, it sounds like, more cross-border collaboration. And so in that way, I think things have sort of opened up in a sense. But in other ways, like as you mentioned with Egypt, you won't be able to attend COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. So there are clearly other ways in which your work has adapted sort of in the negative. And so I'm curious if you can think of other examples of how your work has adapted or changed, expanded or reduced in response to these closing spaces?
Yeah, Egypt is very complicated. From one side, sometimes it's very, very difficult to work. Even when you cover victims, we published an investigation in anonymous name of a journalist who covered the prisoners when they are on administrative detention. They renew for them the administrative detention. Some of them are 8 years now in prison under administrative detention with no charges. We had access to talk to those prisoners inside the prison and had access to talk to their families. Even in this case, the victims, they don't know the real name of the journalist. And we gave him or her a mobile with a different number, and this number vanished when we finished the field work. So it's complicated in Egypt. Yet, because it's a very big country, it's easier than Gaza and Palestine. Because there's no way to hide. So in Gaza and Palestine, we were working on an investigation, and in the middle of the investigation, the journalist became one. So we had to stop and kill the story. So it's different things. We collaborate with human rights defenders in Egypt to try to help them. They face even similar or more situations. So we try to help them with different things, with trainings, as well as to collaborate in publishing timing. So before COP27, for example, now we are planning human rights investigations to be published because many people are focusing on environment in Egypt these days. But it's extremely sad. We are the generation that had a high hopes with 2011. I was so hopeful that things are really changing, to the extent that I did a documentary called The Road to January 25. It's a documentary that starts in 2018 and ends with the first day of the revolution. So we had really high hopes that change is coming. And this is why the situation now is completely what we did not expect will happen. And from what we see, things are not improving for freedom of expression in Egypt. And unfortunately, also internationally, it's not supporting any real change within Egypt. But in spite of all of this, our biggest community of journalists are in Egypt, and we still can work. While, for example, Algeria is extremely difficult. Morocco is becoming more difficult. So yes, the focus is in Egypt because of 100 million people, but still there is ways to still function.
Can I add something to that, please? Are most of you journalism majors or Middle East studies, or is it a mixed bag, I guess? Okay. Close enough. Okay. So what I was going to say is the weird thing about adapting to totally everything closing down, nobody feels like they have to talk to a journalist or be accountable or even give a comment. Some of the weirdest, I mean, I read a lot of Aegis investigations, and the weirdest excuses. Your website isn't registered in this country, so screw you. Why should I talk to you? So what? Does Fox and Quartz and every single website in the world, and now this news, and everybody have to register in Ramallah and Amman and Cairo and Beirut for somebody to take it seriously? Okay, and it's the gig economy. So who knows who these people are writing for, Deutsche Welle or whatever. So anywho, it's just becoming more nonsensical. The good thing about, despite all the surveillance and closing down and no real feeling the need, even in America, to respond or be held accountable to, especially journalists, because they label them as activists, not as journalists. And then that makes it easy to kill them or ignore them or jail them or whatever. And what it is life is so much more available online. So some of these kids know how to scrub and where to scrub. They can find the guy that was in a party or a nightclub or a ceremony where he cut the red ribbon on a bridge that collapsed, from 3 years ago because somebody will have documented it maybe in passing or by mistake or in the periphery. So they're amazing how they're adapting to finding sources without government or private sector or public sector or anybody helping, so it's just, I guess, the next generation will adapt, same as you guys in doing research. Nobody, I mean, at least there's primary sources still in academia, but in journalism, no. Journalism is the first draft of history. How are you going to write it if nobody wants to tell you what just happened?
Yeah, exactly. And open source as data gave us much more access.
But there's not that much open source data in our part of the world.
Open source from social media,
Yes.
from finding out things, from satellite images, also on social media. And it was very easy to track families of some officials or businessmen in, they were extremely, everything was
Public.
So yes.
Things on Facebook with you
Yes,
guys.
yeah. In Egypt, everybody on Facebook.
You had a question? Sorry, I didn't.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm not a student. I work for the Center for International Media Assistance. And I was curious, for those of us who are working on these issues of freedom of expression, press freedom, et cetera, outside of the Arab world, I'm curious about, what are contextually specific ways that we can support independent media in the Arab world specifically? Like, what are the sort of the best examples of that you've seen, things that have worked instead of, everything looks so dark all the time, but like, what have you seen that has worked?
There's a lot that can work, of course, disseminating the content of the stories, supporting, training for those journalists, giving exposure. It means a lot to them. We have excellent, partners in the States who support our work and believe in it. And this also gives us safety because it's important that when we have ambassadors, for example, attending our annual forum, it gives us a very good safety thing also. It's not, because those ambassadors are unimportant, no, because they want to make. So I think independent media and the shrinking space is everywhere in the world, not only in MENA, but the support can be done, financial support and non-financial support. From non-financial support, it's disseminating the voices. I think the voices of the Middle East and North Africa is not as much as it should be in the States. So it's not very clear. Many people, they don't know about what's happening. And I think one of the problems, of course, is the language, but then when it is translated into English, it needs to be given the focus or the shedding light for this. When there's, when like Shireen Abu Akleh was killed in Palestine, this was very clear in the States, and it focused on what's happening in Palestine. So I think with the social media also, there is a positive side of this, and we can notice that there is some positive side in solidarity, but not as quantity as we aim. But I always say, maybe because we are facing a lot of challenges, we think always of solidarity, but we need to do the work. At the end, this is on the ground. Change should come from within the region. It will not come from outside.
Coco, you had a question.
Yeah, this is from the online audience, and if you don't mind, I also have a question of my own. First from Zoom, can you comment about Israel obtaining the Korean newspaper archives?
That's right.
Which Ahram one?
Yeah, that's Mohammed Salawi says Korean Al-Ahram newspaper archives. Mohammed, if you could maybe add a bit of context to your.
I had something like this, but I'm not sure if it is fact or not. So I prefer that that they bought the archive of Al-Ahram. I think they probably downloaded and uploaded to their libraries. Like they have digital libraries and they are uploading this, but I'm not sure if they really bought it.
So keep your eyes open for the future. And then my own question, in a previous job before CCAS, I worked with Photo Osman or something. We collaborated on a project. And one thing that she emphasized was the power of storytelling, and then kind of a general critique of Arab journalism as a field was the ability to really get the story across aside from that. Can you talk about the power of storytelling, why it matters, other techniques and tools that you teach journalists in general from Irish?
Yeah, I think the story in Arabic language, the storytelling, and this is, I'm not sure if in academia it has been studied a lot, maybe Professor Rachel can tell us. The storytelling in Arabic language is so different than the storytelling in English language. It's different. When we tell a story in Arabic and people enjoy it and say it's nice and everything, it's so different than the classical storytelling in English language. This is the major problem when translation happens. Then, if you don't adapt this and do it in a different storytelling, nobody will be able to read it. I was discussing this with a professor in Hong Kong, and he told me that it's similar to when it is in Hong Kong language, like in Mandarin, and then translating it to English. It doesn't work. So you need to adapt the whole thing. So this is the first issue. The second issue is storytelling is not taught in the, I would not say in the perfect, but like digital storytelling is different than storytelling. And now everybody is having the stories by digital platforms. So we need to adapt to this. And there is a generation, let's say, transition that is happening now with the young generation fully digital and us that I am TV, generation of TV, not the generation of digital. And then most of the editors in chief are radio generation. So I think we are in a bubble that is not helping having digital storytelling advanced as we should. And many journalists, they think that gathering information, especially in investigative journalism, will end up like a police report. This is the facts. This is what happened. Okay, we say that. Okay, let's transfer this police report that is good for the court if we go to court into a story. Let's do now the transition into storytelling. And this is where Huda Uthman, for example, was excellent. She did training into investigative journalism for more than 30 years in tens of countries around the world and trying always to do this. And the secret, I think, you can learn this. It's science and art together, but you need to do it for every single new story. So every story has a spirit for storytelling. What's the spirit? It's the real spirit of the characters of those stories, like the victims of those stories, the people, their voices. So it's not your storytelling, it's how you can tell their story in the best way. And this comes, if you want to do it in an excellent way, from the deep research into understanding this. So you go to the field, you spend much time with those people, then you can do a storytelling. So as simple as it could be when we teach storytelling, as difficult as it is to implement it and do a good story.
So thank you for your presentation. I'd like to say that the first piece of investigative art journalism article that I've read in Ari was the Cleopatra cigarettes piece. It is basically one of my most favorite pieces of investigative journalism. So in that piece, like it was really well written in Arabic, but although I enjoyed it thoroughly, as other pieces of investigative journalism, there is a problem with the reach to public audiences, like on a wider scale.
Yeah.
So how do you increase the reach of this pieces, because some of them are like really important, and they can like initiate political debate on some specific topics. My second question is regarding the security of the journalist. If, for example, if a journalist wants like to be completely anonymous, even to the reach team, like just want to contact the region completely anonymous, so out of fear that maybe one of the reach team's members is like infiltrated by like one government, and all government like collaborate. They have their own consortium of security. So is that possible, or is it even that a security threat in itself? To be contacted by a completely anonymous person asking collaboration.
Right, two questions. First, for example, Ahmed Shami, the one who did Cleopatra, is now working for BBC Arabic, also, as a producer doing investigations, TV investigations with BBC Arabic in London. There's a nice story about Ahmed Shami. He won the Golden Award for Arij in 2020 when it was fully virtual. So there was fully virtual, we couldn't have a stage or celebrate his award. So we collaborated secretly with his friend. And so she came to him. It was December, very cold in London, with coats, everything. It should be outside because it's Corona, they cannot be inside. And she convinced him that we need to watch the ceremony together. It's available online, this scene. And they sat together, and then we announced that gold, and she got from her bag the award and gave it to him. It was live in front of everybody. So it was so nice. So more people for investigation. This is something that all investigative IJ centers around the world want to find the secret answer to it. Some of the answers is try to take one piece from inside the investigation, put it on social media, let the discussion happen there, and a few people will come and read the full investigation. But the full investigation with all its details, it's a heavy piece. It's not something light. So until now, what Guardian, New York Times, Arij, everybody discovered, part of the investigations will go viral for a lot of people, but not the full investigation. For anonymous, we have been requested this before, but we and all other IJ centers, including ICIJ, we refuse to do this because we need to know whom this journalist is. And we can do a very, very small circle around this. So it can be only the editor-in-chief or only the coach and editor who knows this journalist, and we have done this before and made it fully secure for this. But what if really somebody from the government or from the security agency is the one who's telling us, leaking for us information, because they want also to give us information in a way to manipulate us as well. So this question came to us and many other, GIJN, the Global Journalism Network, and ICIJ. It's not possible. We need to know the identity, and if this person trusts the organization. And I'm so glad that the reputation of Arij is trustable. We have tried all our 15 years to be very independent and be on like the same page with everybody. I'm so proud that we are still training people inside Damascus. We are still training people, Syrians in Turkey, in Idlib. We are one of the few Arab organizations who managed to do this. So we need to know the journalists, and it's our responsibility to keep that secure.
I have a quick question. So if all the journalists across the region share similar problems or face similar problems, what does Arij do in order to help, say, a reporter in Baghdad realize that they have the same or face the same problems as a journalist in Casablanca, and how they can collaborate in order to problem solve together?
Yeah, they have a lot in common, much more than they think. There is, of course, different challenges. Situation in Morocco is so different than Iraq. Iraq is very, very dangerous situation for investigative journalists and female investigative journalists in particular. But of course, that cross-border collaboration can happen because they have things in common. They can support each other, they can protect each other, they can reach to much more bigger sources, they can reach to more audience, they can help each other, and it's happening. And it's happening also in getting opportunities for them to work. So we have a closed groups on Signal where they can talk together. And sometimes a journalist in Baghdad will say, I lost my job. The publishing platform I used to work with, an independent media, closed. And there is no job. Then you find a Casablanca telling him, okay, come, we'll have, a freelance job for you. You can write with us about this and all of that. And that's one of the nicest things that happen. If somebody, got a master's degree, a PhD degree, it's celebration in the group. Everybody is congratulating each other. So that's the sense. They are really a real community. The problem that because the challenges are so intense, sometimes you tend to forget how much in common we can collaborate. There's a situation in a small village in Iraq is very tense today. It's difficult to look. Sometimes we have people who have no passports. They cannot travel at all due to their work. Their governments, they don't give them passports. When they appear on Zoom with the others, the emotions they have to the others is fascinating because they feel they are part of a community, but they never really met those people at all.
Anything else? Okay, nobody online, Coco, any questions? No, okay. Well, thank you so much. This was really fantastic and so informative and really, just really powerful to hear all the work that your organization is doing to affect change on the ground, around.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing about change and impact. Sometimes you publish investigation and there's no impact at all. And sometimes when you expose corruption, like this politician, this businessman is corrupted, then they are promoted. Nobody fired. But you can feel like you are, why we are doing all of this? And why we are spending like one year working on this story when nothing happens. And then we published this one story in Yemen in mid-2020, where our journalists found out that there is in Yemen prisoners who are there, hundreds of prisoners for years, forgotten. Because of the war, they have never, went to the court or something, and they did very small things like, a small loan they didn't pay, so they ended up being in prison and all of that. And he had access to inside the prison, and he filmed with those prisoners. And we were, of course, very touched with the story and all of that. And we published, and we didn't expect anything from publishing the story. And once the story was published, a couple of weeks later, 1,800 prisoners were freed.
Wow.
From 7 different prisons that we covered.
Wow.
And at that moment, all the office were crying.
Yeah.
Because we felt that we contributed to the freedom of those people. And on those moments, really, it gives us hope that there is impact. Because in most of the stories, we don't see the change. Or we say, maybe it will help with cumulative work that sometime there will be a change.
Yeah.
And really, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.